Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear. This is the 100th episode of Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear, and we are celebrating with a very special guest. Don Felder is here.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, Mitch.
Happy to have you here.
Yeah,
thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
We're actually keeping you busy this weekend. We've got this video, and you're doing a songwriting workshop tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be up here. You know, I've dealt with Sweetwater a lot, just over the phone and ordering stuff here. I really enjoyed the relationship with the company, and to be invited up to actually play with you guys and do a performance and get a tour of the facility was just a great treat.
Well, we're so happy to have you here. You mentioned that I'm actually part of an Eagles tribute that we're putting on tonight called Victim of Love, and you're going to actually come out and do a special guest
I
with
am.
us.
We're going to sit in and jam on 4 or 5 songs and tear it up. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
Us too. It's actually kind of strange because, you know, you work up the songs for the tribute and you dig into them and everything, but to actually play them with someone who wrote them and who played on the originals is kind of a little bit odd, a little bit different.
Well, if I can remember them. Like I said, my memory from the 70s is vague at best, you know, but no, I know the songs really well.
I bet you
We
do.
were talking about how they were recorded and that each chorus has a different little vocal arrangement instead of just the cut, copy, and paste that so many people do now. And there's a lot of unique things that go into each one of those songs that people just don't really recognize when it goes by, but it's just interesting. Yeah.
You miss that stuff because I of course, through the years in bar bands and cover bands, played some of those songs here and there, but you just strum through them.
Yeah.
But when you sit down to actually learn them, you guys put there's a lot of little details in there. Was that stuff all intentional?
Yeah, you know, we were quite meticulous about not only the quality of what went onto the records, but the songs themselves, the songwriting, the production, the engineering. There are very few, if any, mistakes on those records.
Right.
If anybody made even the slightest mistake or a little out-of-tune clam, we've repaired it. Now, in those days, it wasn't auto-tune. It was actually re-sing it or replay it and punch in to grab that line or that phrase. But there are very few mistakes on those records. Everything was pretty much intentional and written that way and produced that way.
Right. Did the person who wrote the song come in with those ideas? I'll give you a great example. In, say, Take It Easy. In the first 2 verses, it stays pretty straight to the G to D to C, but in the last verse, it goes G to D to A minor in one spot, just for one chord.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Where did an idea like that come
Jackson Browne actually wrote, I would say 90% of Take It Easy, and that chord change, I believe, came from Jackson, because as long as I've known that song, it's been that 3rd verse has the A minor instead of a C in it. And it kind of makes it a little different, a little unique, and a lot of people that play it just forget it, and they go right back to the C like they did in the first 2 verses. Those sort of little intentional, unique things, lyrically, melodically, melody-wise, arrangement-wise, background vocal-wise, where everything was just a little bit different, I thought made it more interesting than just kind of the cut, copy, paste replication of choruses and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It really sets it apart and really catches your ear when that little change comes up there once you're aware of that kind of thing. The other thing, of course, as doing this tribute, is trying to get all those background vocal parts and all those harmonies and all those things. How was the arranging process done for all of that stuff?
Well, basically, there were so many different approaches to each song that everybody brought a certain talent to that particular song, whether it was guitar tracks or vocal arrangements or lyrics, and the melding of all those ideas and the input from so many different people seemed to have this kind of torque and stretch that went into making it something different than just one person doing the arrangement.
Right.
There were definitely stacks, the way vocals were stacked for harmony vocals, based on people's ranges. Like Randy Meisner and Timothy Schmidt had the highest range. They always wound up singing the high part. Henley would sing in the background the next second harmony down. Then Glenn and Bernie or I would sing the lower parts on the harmony. So the typical stack of voices was organized based on people's vocals range, but the arrangements and how it came in and how it went out and the phrasing and everything really went around the way the lead singer was phrasing. Because if he was singing in the chorus would have to phrase like the lead vocal. And so, depending on how he sang the lead vocal in that chorus, all the backgrounds would phrase like him. I remember making Bee Gees records with Barry Gibbs, and he was the only person I saw that would go out in the studio, and he could sing falsetto parts 12 times in unison. and all of his lips would close exactly at the same time, and his vibratos would all be in the same speed. It was just remarkable. It sounded like one big, fat vibrato unison voice. And if you listen to one, it sounded kind of thin and wimpy, but by the time you put 10 or 12 of them on, it was the Barry Gibb lead vocal. So
Right.
he had a special talent for being able to do something so unique like that. So the Eagles had a similar talent for arranging their vocals that way as well.
Right, right. And when it came time to do the guitar parts, the parts are so melodic, they fit the song so well. How did you come up with those? Were those improvised in the studio? Did you plan those ahead, or how did all that work out?
Some of them were just made up on the spot, like the introduction for Hotel California on Hell Freezes Over, the acoustic introduction.
Right.
We had rehearsed the song on the sound stage with Joe and I. I'd come up with the idea to do it on kind of flamenco nylon string guitar and make it a little more acoustic sounding. It was back in the time where everybody was doing unplugged versions.
Right.
So we'd come up with the idea to do it with acoustic guitars, and I'd worked up pretty much the harmonies and that sort of stuff. But then when we got on the sound stage at Warner Studio that afternoon to film, the song originally started just at the beginning of the song with the introduction. Don said at sound check, he said, "We need a different introduction. We need something special for this." I said, "Well, come up with something." And he said, no, you come up with something. So I just made up on the spot that introduction while we were filming it that night. And we did 2 takes. We filmed the show twice, an early show and a late show. Both times they were different. One take was better than the other, so we just used that. Other solos were meticulously sewn together in the studio, where we would take part of a melody from the song and include a hint of that in the solo. And like for one of these nights, I love Dave Sanborn. I think he's one of the greatest sax players there is, right?
Right.
And so when we were doing that track, I kept hearing a sax solo. But we didn't have a sax player in our band.
Right, right.
I kind of took the idea of trying to make a lead guitar solo sound like a sax, like Dave Sanborn would have played that part, and kind of wrote a horn solo or a sax solo for that in the studio. And then when Joe came into the band for the long run, I wanted to write a song that had 2 talk boxes in it. And so I wrote Those Shoes, which it sounds like 2 trumpet players, like playing those lines together, you know, like a horn section. So a lot of times I would write stuff in advance with a concept musically of how I wanted it to sound, and then other times I'd just make it up on the sound stage, or like hearing a sax solo instead of a guitar solo and trying to make it sound like a sax. So they all came together different ways. You know?
Right, right. And what kind of gear were you using for those earlier recordings on some of those classic records?
Well, for the song "Victim of Love," I used a tweed champ on 10, or maybe it goes to 12. I don't know as far up as it would go, and a Strat. And it had an Echoplex. I don't know if you remember what an Echoplex is, with the tape that kind of gave it the slap. And that was it. And then for a lot of one of these nights in Hotel California, I used a Les Paul, a 59 Les Paul, and a Tweed Deluxe. And that was it. Just plugged in and turned up, you know.
So not many effects or pedals, and there weren't a lot of effects and pedals in the 70s and things.
There were very few options back there. There was the old fuzz tone, which you know, was inappropriate. I remember later Joe and I started using this Boss chorus, like I think it was a C1. It had like a preamp in it, so you could kind of overdrive your amp a little bit, and had a stereo out. We used that on this one track that later became, for the long run, that later became heavy metal. We recorded it with the Eagles, and it was kind of never finished, and then later I used that same song track idea that I'd written for that song, which was originally tentatively entitled "You're Really High, Aren't You?" When I saw the heavy metal movie, I went, that's the right track for that.
Totally appropriate.
Yeah.
Totally appropriate. So was it a huge challenge for a song like you mentioned, One of These Nights? There's 3, 4, 5 guitar parts that are all very tightly interlocking. They're simple parts, but unless they tightly interlock, you don't get the effect, and the song doesn't move correctly.
That's correct.
How difficult was it to take that on stage and make that happen in a huge arena?
It was pretty easy. We had 3 guitar players in the band, myself, Bernie, who was during one of these nights, and Glenn. And so we kind of assigned ourselves the parts that had been played on the record to play live. And that worked until we got to Hotel California. And during the making of the Hotel California record, I wound up playing multiple guitar parts. The acoustic introduction, which was mic'd and put through a Leslie, and then some of the reggae parts and some of the harmony descending parts and the solo parts. And I think I played a lot of guitar tracks on that song.
There's a lot of tracks on that song.
And then we got onto the soundstage to rehearse to go out for the Hotel California tour. And I said, how am I going to play all those guitar parts? How do I make this thing sound like the record? And I remember seeing Chet Atkins when I was 14 years old with the first stereo guitar. And he sat on a stage much like this, and he had wired his Gretsch so the bass 3 strings went out of one output to one amp on one side of the stage, and the top 3 strings went out of another output to another amp on the other side of the stage. And he sat there and played Dixie and Yankee Doodle Dandy at the same time. And they both came out of different amps, and it sounded exactly like 2 people playing 2 different songs. And I was just amazed. First of all, stereo when I was 14 was like brand new, right? Or close to it.
Sure.
So when I got to the sound stage, I said, how in the world can I do all these guitar parts? And I figured out if I took a double neck like this and rewired it so that one neck went out of one output jack, and another neck went out of the other output jack, much like I'd seen Chet do, and followed the switching on it, that I could have 2 guitars strapped on my body, that I could go from the introduction kind of picking part, the introduction, to the solo parts, and have 2 different rigs set up. So that's why I'm stuck with playing this thing every night, because it's the only way I can do that song, you know?
Right. Now, on the original recording of Hotel California, I've seen 2 different rumors. One was that it was done with a 6-string and then with a Nashville tuned guitar, and another that it was done with a 12-string.
It was a 12-string acoustic Martin, and I took a pickup, I think it was a D'Angelico or D'Armond pickup, and screwed it into the O hole, and the cable came out, and we just gaffers taped it down and ran that into a Leslie. And so we mic'd the Leslie in stereo, which was really cool for that time, and the acoustic was in the middle, and it had this kind of swirling 12-string effect with it, instead of just a acoustic guitar. You know?
Right. So you had the dry acoustic in the middle, and then the effects on the outside.
Correct.
So you were doing the wet, dry, wet thing.
Yeah.
Decades in advance of the rest of the rest of the world catching on to it, right? That's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. So you mentioned being very young and getting into guitar. You're from Gainesville, Florida, originally, and you had some kind of people you associated with who ended up being famous themselves. In your very first band, Stephen Stills was in the Continentals, right?
Yeah, I met Stephen, I think we were 14, and he was a runaway from a military academy in Orlando. His dad had sent him to military school, and he bolted and went AWOL and came to Gainesville, showed up with his guitar, and we wound up being in this band called the Continentals for about a year and a half, something like that. And when he left, Bernie Ledden's father, who was from San Diego, had been hired by the University of Florida to set up their nuclear physicist research center. So he and his whole family moved to Gainesville, met Bernie, who was a great acoustic guitar, 5-string banjo, really a brilliant bluegrass musician.
Right.
And he joined the band, and we changed the name of the band. And there were a lot of people that were in that little town. It was this kind of scrawny, buck-toothed, blonde-haired, scraggly-looking kid named Tommy Petty that I gave lessons to, guitar lessons to at the music store, and worked with his band. He had a band called the Rucker Brothers Band and a bunch of other little bands in Gainesville. The Allman Brothers' mother lived in Daytona Beach. So they would come down and work during the school year at the fraternity parties around the University of Florida in Gainesville. And in the summer when the school was out, we'd all go to Daytona Beach and work the clubs and bars and pier and everything over there. And became good friends with them. We were in battles of the bands together. They always won because they were by far the best musicians and singers in Florida. Dwayne showed me how to play slide guitar, which has just been a delightful thing to have as part of my history. And there were a lot of people that came out of a very unusual little area of people that went on to become platinum selling artists, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame members, all out of this little place in the middle of nowhere.
Pretty amazing little scene that came out of there,
Yeah.
a little wellspring of talent that came out. Yeah.
Reminds me of Motown or someplace that had just a lot of acts and artists come out of it,
Yeah, it makes you wonder what it is that in that little area would make that suddenly coalesce like that.
I don't
come
know if
together.
it was something that was in the water or something in what we were smoking at the same time, but there was something going on there.
Right. Well, you mentioned your double neck, and we've got the double neck here, and it is modified. I see you have 2 jacks on there, so that is the idea, is that you've got the 12-string neck coming out of one side, the 6-string coming out of the other side. And then how do you have the control set up? Do you have 2 volumes?
When you switch pickups, it switches from, or when you switch necks, it switches different outputs. And there's a volume control for each guitar and 1 tone control.
So does the tone control work on both necks then, or is it just on the
just on this.
the 6-string neck?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then tell us about this guitar.
Well, this guitar is I think it's the AP Artist Proof. If I look at the back of it.
Has a number 1 on it
this
there.
is number 1, yeah. And so this was the original Artist Proof. When they took my 59 Les Paul, Gibson took this double neck out of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The original was in Cleveland. Took it to their shop, went over it head to toe for every nick, scratch, split, and everything, and replicated it to a T. I mean, the color, the faded kind of white into this kind of older looking yellowish color.
Yeah, right.
And then they asked for my 59 Les Paul, and it was in remarkably good shape. I got it in Texas from a guy named Tony Dukes, I think in about 1973, 73 or 74, and I paid $1,200 for it.
Wow.
Which was a lot of money in 74.
But I'd love to get one for that now.
When I took the guitar back to show the rest of the band, Tony would show up in the station wagon just full of old Strats and Tellys and Les Pauls and all sorts of stuff, and I would buy almost everything he had. But that was the most expensive guitar I bought from him. I came back and opened the case and went, wow, that's beautiful. Where'd you get that? How much is that? And I said, oh, I got it from Tony. Oh, how much did it cost you? I said, $1,200. And Glenn said, cheap, in a very sarcastic way, But I used it, for years on the road. I used it on every record that I recorded with the Eagles. Used it in the studio for the Hotel California record and the solos and stuff. So when Gibson asked me about doing a Don Felder Hotel California guitar, I said, well, which one do you want?
Right.
Do you want the double neck that's really iconic for that song? People have seen it for so many years. Or do you want the one I used in the studio to record it? And they said, let's do both.
Both, yeah.
So they wound up, they took my 59 and went over it just exactly down to the scrapes and scratches. And it used to have a Bigsby on it, so you can see the old screw hole where Bigsby used to be. That I took off, some Belk rash on the back. And, the ironic thing is that the first person I really saw that inspired me to start playing guitar was Elvis Presley. And I was 10 years old, and I saw Elvis on the Ed Sullivan Show. I saw all these girls screaming at him, and, oh, Elvis, oh, my God. And I said, I think I want to do that. That looks like a good way to meet girls.
Yeah.
And then when I went into the Gibson Custom Shop, when they were getting ready to start working on replicating this 59, I said, how do you guys put the scratches in the back of the guitar from the belt buckle rashes? And he opened a drawer and he pulled out this belt buckle that was a rhinestone belt buckle that said Elvis on it. He said, this is what we use. And I said, that is absolutely perfect. That was my initial inspiration that got me into doing all this. It's only appropriate that Elvis was the one that absolutely put all the scratching it. But and this, we worked really closely with Gibson to make this as close to my original 59 as possible in color, in sound, in necks. They did a remarkable job of scanning that guitar. I mean, down to, if I put a blindfold on and had 5 different guitars, 4 of these replicas and my original, I would have a very hard time telling the difference between sound and playability. And that company has just been wonderful to me over the last 40 or 45 years. I've been of dealing with them. They've just been really supportive. Henry and everybody there has just been great. Last show I did for Gibson was at the Beverly Hills showroom a couple of months ago, and Henry was there. He asked me if I'd get up and play something for the group of people that were there, and I said, yeah, well, I don't mind doing that if you'll join me. So Henry got up with a guitar, and the 2 of us played this song with a band. And, you know, they're just really great, fun people, and they make a remarkable product. And I remember salivating over these guitars at the window of the music store, and then it was such an honor to be part of, you know, their production legacy and being asked to let them do this, and I love that company.
Yeah, absolutely, and we do have to give them special thanks as well because they were part of sponsoring you you being here today
and Rick
this weekend.
Kimber in their custom department is just a prince. He keeps such a watchful eye on the quality of everything that comes out of their custom department that I don't know of another company that's making guitars with such a watchful eye as their custom shop.
Yeah, it's really fun to go through it and see the shop and the hand detailed, you know, the handwork that goes into all the detail that they do in there is really, really amazing.
I'll play this tomorrow night with us, or tonight with us.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah.
That's going to be great. So did they duplicate the pickups that you have in your original?
Yeah, we worked hard on that, and they went through and measured the ohmage and the output of it and the tone, and several times they sent me AP guitars, artist-proof guitars, to be able to compare with my original. And I wanted to be able to do the blindfold test where you play one, same setting on the amp, unplug one, plug in the other, and it sound exactly the same. And they finally nailed it down to a T. So I was delighted with it. I play that guitar a lot.
That's awesome.
I leave my 59, well, my 59's on loan at the Grammy Museum right now. So I use that one instead.
Yeah, that's probably don't want to take that one on tour too much. That's really have to be a little too handcuff it to your wrist or something,
Yeah, that's right.
To keep that with you. Yeah. Unfortunately, those are all sold out. Right? That's not a current model. I wish I'd love to get one. I wish they'd come back out with do a reissue of the reissue.
Well, we did a limited edition. I think they did 300 of the Les Pauls, and they did 150 of the double necks, and both issues are sold out. So.
Right. So you're not only a musician, songwriter, composer, and all of the things you do in the musical world. You're also a best-selling author. Heaven and Hell was your book, kind of detailing your whole life, your autobiography, correct?
Yeah, you know, I never really started out to write a book. First of all, I spent the 9th grade summer repeating English because I failed it, and I was such a poor English student. Who would ever imagine me going on to write a book, especially a New York Times bestseller? But when I left the Eagles, I really did a series of daily meditations where I sat down for between 30 minutes and an hour every day. I started going back and recounting my life, how I'd grown up, childhood experiences, getting involved with music. And as I came out of these meditations, I would write them down longhand on a legal pad. Started stacking up these legal pads, mostly in sort of a self-cathartic process to understand how I got from this very impoverished condition on a little dirt road in Gainesville, Florida, to being involved with a super band like the Eagles, and how I had changed morally, ethically, as a person. And now that that was over, I wanted to center myself and gather a good understanding of where I was and how I got there before I went forward in life, dragging all this unresolved baggage along with me.
Right.
That was the intent. As I had been doing this for about 6 months, my fiance came in and started reading these things, unbeknownst to me. It's like reading someone's diary, and which I didn't mind, but she said, this would make an incredible book. And I just discounted and went, look, I'm not an author, you know.
Right.
So she introduced me to a guy named Michael Ovitz, who was a big player, kind of like David Geffen in Hollywood. He had a large company called AMG that had a film production division, a television production division, a literary division, a management division that managed like Leonardo DiCaprio and a bunch of big movie stars as well. So she said, let's just go talk to Michael. So we set up a meeting with Michael, and he referred me to his literary department. 2 days later, I was on a plane going from LA to New York to meet with 5 publishing houses in New York, just to see if there was any interest in doing this.
Right.
Came back with 5 offers to publish my book.
Wow.
And literally, I had 3 pages.
Right.
And then I had the undaunting task of sorting through my recollections and transferring them into what was going to be a book format, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I kept going back through and filling in the spaces in my life, the blocks of time in my life that I had yet gone through and remembered stories, and just filling out the story. And with the help of a co-writer who actually helped pretty much take my notes and my stories and organize them, and she chronologically put them in order correctly, and that helped with the editor at the publishing company. We kind of shaped this thing into what was a autobiographical format, you know?
Right.
And I thought, well, it's still the cathartic process for myself to kind of heal myself, understand myself, center myself, and go forward. And much to my surprise, it wound up on the New York Times bestsellers list. And it was a really healing process for me to go through. I've recommended that to several people who have issues from their past, whether it's divorce or loss of love or childhood abuse or whatnot, to go back and relive that and sort it out so that you can be free of carrying that burden. It was a very healing process for me.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I've read the book, and there's kind of 2 aspects to it that are interesting. I think some people, of course, will be drawn to the tell-all aspect of it, which is fascinating. But to me, the interesting part was your development as a musician, starting out your very early years, and the parallels I see there with a lot of musicians. Sneaking out to go to concerts, and moving to New York to be in the band there for a short time,
Sure.
and then to LA, and the whole journey you went through, leading up to the mega success and all that stuff was fascinating to me, because each musician takes a little bit different path. And I think when you know some of those things that go into someone's life, it gives you a different insight into their music. So
the thing that I really gleaned from the whole process and looking back through my life is that the one thing that led me down that whole road was just the absolute passionate love of music. My father used to come home from work, and the first thing he'd do was put on Tommy Dorsey or Glenn Miller, and he'd sit and listen to these bands and relax. And seeing that and wanting to please your father, I think, was one of the reasons I started playing music. And then he was very encouraging and helped me buy my first guitars and brought home this little Fender Champ amp, and would just help encourage me. And he bought a reel-to-reel tape recorder so we could borrow people's records and record them on tape, so I could record them at 7.5 and slow them down to 3 3/4 and listen to them in slow motion and learn to play the notes, and then finally get it up to where I could play it at real speed. And he was just very encouraging along the way, and it was kind of our bond together was the love of music. And so as I developed the skills, the more I learned and the more developed I became, the more I loved doing it. So that really was the driving force through it all. I mean, starving in New York for 1.5 years, trying to play at a jazz fusion rock band is not how you're going to get rich. But I just loved jazz and loved playing it. So,
right. And it's part of what contributes to the way you play now, and all of that stuff goes into your background, your current playing.
When I was living in Boston, I wound up playing at the Holiday Inn in Cambridge, in Harvard Square, playing nylon string guitar, playing The Shadow of Your Smile, and all those movie themes while people were eating their steaks and yelling at the waiter and everything. And those skills that I developed to do that wound up coming back to help me. And the jazz improvisation I learned in New York came back to help me. So when we were on the sound stage at Warner Brothers Studio, and Henley says, come up with something, I got a classical guitar, and I can, I've developed my skills in that area thanks to the Holiday Inn and thanks to jazz improvisation. I can just make up something. So all of those little pieces along the way kind of added up to being able to do what I do.
Right. You never know when things are going to come back around. So if some gig
it always does.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been very busy. You just finished the Soundtrack of Summer tour.
Yeah, this summer. I haven't been, quote unquote, touring a lot because I've really learned that I have to balance my public and private life. It's important for me to maintain friendships, family connections with my children and my loved ones, play golf with friends off the road. But it's also important to have enough time playing music and writing and working in the studio and playing in front of live audiences for me to be happy and balanced.
Right.
This summer I accepted a tour to go out with Foreigner and Styx. We did 42 dates in 2.5 months, which was a tour. There were sections where we did 9 shows in 11 days, which was different cities. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. And I probably do 50 to 60 shows a year myself, either private shows, casinos, fairs, county fairs, Canada, Japan, through Europe and stuff like that. But that was my first quote-unquote tour in a long time. But we're planning to do something for 2015. We may do another month of the Soundtrack of Summer early in the year, and then there's some other tours that are being packaged for the summer and late fall for next year. So I'll go back out. I enjoy it.
Nice.
It's a lot different sitting in a studio writing and working out parts and songs than it is getting on stage and playing live in front of 8, 10, 15,000 people, which is really a lot of fun.
Right, right. I heard a recording of you playing Hotel California with Tommy Shaw, and you guys were trading licks and things. It sounded like fun.
Well, Tommy and I have been friends for a long time. He co-wrote a couple of songs with me on my last CD, Road to Forever. Really nice guy, great voice, great player. So when we did this tour, we were saying, look, you got to come out and sit in on our set. And we started doing Hotel. He said, you got to come sit in on Blue Collar Man. So I'd go out and sing and play, and we'd jam together. Just a lot of fun. It was probably the most fun tour that I've been in a long time, mainly because all the people involved with the tour, not only the guys in the band, but the crew, the bus drivers, the truck drivers, on our day off, we'd all go play golf. 25 or 30 of us would go take over this golf course and play golf, or we had a bowling night one night. We just really spent a lot of time as friends, hanging out. We'd have every 2 to 3 weeks, we'd have a big dinner where like 90 people in the organization would show up and either be at a restaurant or a barbecue or something, and just share the time together and have fun. And it was a different feel than a lot of other tours that I've done, which have been really kind of closed and, not quite so open and warm and friendly. I had a great time, really enjoyed it. I had a wonderful time.
So for someone at your level, when you're putting together a band, and your band sounds great, what do you look for in the musicians? We have a lot of aspiring musicians who watch these videos. What do you look for when you're picking musicians for your band?
Well, first of all, there's a level of competency that has to be there, vocally and musicianship, first and foremost. Secondly, you spend about an hour and a half to 2 hours with the people on stage. You got 22 hours off the stage, either on a plane or in a bus or at a hotel or something, to live with these guys. And so I choose people that are very comfortable to be with. Just a lot of fun. Typically really smart, like Frank Symes, one of my guitar players, who's now the musical director for the Who tour.
Right.
Probably one of the smartest guys I've met in a long time. Speaks fluent Japanese, unbelievable, reads books like How the Brain Can Change Itself and the research and how your brain works. Just a very brilliant guy. Very interesting to hang out and talk with Frank, and I enjoy his company a great deal. Shim von Schreck, my bass player, classically trained operatic singer, tenor, goes and sings Latin opera on a stage, no mic, in Latin for 2 hours for a couple of weeks every summer. Plays unbelievable bass, writes full orchestra, shoots and films and produces videos. I mean, just multi-talented, very intelligent guy that makes it very interesting, those 22 hours that you have off the stage. And then he walks on stage and he just sings every high part spectacularly and plays unbelievably well. And then you get off stage and it's a lot of laughs and a lot of interesting conversation and stuff. So I look for people that are not only gifted players, that have a certain level of proficiency, I guess, but that are also very interesting people that I want to have in my life. We don't have anybody in our band or crew that's a problem with an ego or has, as they say in England, a shoulder where they're kind of like, cocky.
Right.
Don't need any of that. And it's a lot of fun. We have things in common and interest, and I've been playing with these guys for almost 10 years now, the same guys. So
Nice.
it's great.
Yeah. It kind of comes back to what you were alluding to earlier, talking about yourself. You got to have that balance.
Yes, correct.
I think sometimes musicians can lock themselves in their room and be a great musician, but there's a balance aspect to it too.
That's right, yeah.
Right. So I always like to ask in these interviews when I have someone on your level come in, you've obviously attained the highest heights, and you've been associated with a lot of musicians. For example, I heard about your tour of Hotel California with Fleetwood Mac when it was just about the time that Rumors came out. And so a lot of really tremendous musicians over the years that you've worked with, Styx, Foreigner, all these people. What is it that separates those stars from the people who aren't necessarily stars? Or what is it that makes them a star?
Wow, that's the mysterious question, isn't it, really?
Right.
It's like, what do people see or hear or feel in the songs and music when they turn on the radio or listen to their iPad or see a video that relates to them? And I think that's true of any form of literature, any form of music, film production. It's the ability to have a concept musically, lyrically in a song and perform it in a way that people respond or relate or it touches them. For example, like I do this thing up in Canada. They have the Musical Therapy Trust, which is a Canadian organization. I go into places, they have a brain injury ward where everybody that's in this part of the hospital has some form of brain damage, either through accident. One guy's a Bosnian soldier that has shrapnel in his brain. A lot of these people are in wheelchairs, they can't speak. But if I go in with an acoustic guitar and start playing some of those old Eagles songs that they knew before they had their injury, they can sing along with it. They won't even talk to their nurses and stuff, but there's something that touches a certain place in their brain, their memory, that stirs their recollection to where they can relate to that. And to me, that's like, even if you have brain damage, if your music has been able to reach people at a level that they accept it and they relate to it, and usually those things are about the human condition, something that we all share, and the songs and the feelings and the music that people relate to. I think the artists that are able to do that, whether it's poetry or acting or film production or music, that's what separates the people that become really successful from those that aren't quite at that same level. And I think that's more of a gift than it is something you can develop. It's a human insight that you either have or you don't.
Right. Great words of wisdom there. Thank you very much. And thanks so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to have you here at Sweetwater. You're doing a songwriting workshop tomorrow, which I know is sold out, and the people are really excited to spend the day learning about all these great insights you have on songwriting. And personally, I can't wait to share the stage with you tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun.
We'll tear it up.
Absolutely, looking forward to it. Thanks again. We appreciate you being here, and thanks for helping us celebrate the 100th Sweetwater Guitars and Gear video.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
I'm Mitch Gallagher. Thank you for joining me for Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear.